Russian separatists in the Donbass to protect them from the Ukrainians. This began an 8-year war, and there was an international agreement done through what's called the Normandy format. That is Germany, France, with Russia in observation, and Ukraine, negotiated a settlement which would have brought an end to the conflict in the Donbass, recognized the Donbass to be part of Ukraine, but that the Russians would be subjected to a special autonomous status that was separate from the constitutional language that made Ukraine first language, et cetera, Ukrainian. The Russian presidents, Poroshenko and then Zelensky, refused to sign it, not because it was a bad deal, because if they signed it, the neo-Nazis that were now empowered have said they will kill them. So we have a situation where the Russian government, the Ukrainian government, Ukrainian policy is being dictated by neo-Nazi ideology. And if you know anything about the former Soviet Union, about Russia, you know that they don't take the issue of Nazi ideology lightly. 23 million to 32 million Soviet citizens lost their lives in a conflict with Nazi Germany.
Yep.
And in every town, every village, every city, there are memorials to the sacrifice of the Russian people in that war. And every year they celebrate on May 9th, Victory Day, which is a day of celebration of the army that's liberated them from the Nazis, liberated Europe from the Nazis. And so now to have this Nazi ideology be mainstreamed in Ukraine, people say, well, what? They're a minority. Yeah, politically, if they ran for office, it's a minority. But a minority isn't a minority if they can use the threat of violence to coerce the parliament to vote with a strong majority to make Stepan Bandera the national hero of Ukraine, to mainstream his ideology. So it's not a minority. They've become an influencing majority, so to speak, because if they disagree with something, nothing happens. Russia viewed this as a threat. And so Russian military action that we saw transpire on February 24th was simply William Burns' warning coming to fruition. Russia tried everything to create a diplomatic off-ramp. They reached out to NATO over and over and over again, to the United States, and they said, don't ignore us. Work with us. We can compromise. But if you ignore us, we will have no choice but to embrace the military technical response, which is this operation. So what we see right now is a military operation that has two primary military objectives. The first is denazification, the destruction of the nationalist military units that had incorporated personnel that embrace neo-Nazi ideology, and the destruction of the political parties that breathe life into this, that mainstream this. That's one goal. The other goal is the demilitarization of the Ukrainian military. What this means is that from 2015 on, the Ukrainian military had been trained by NATO to be a de facto extension of NATO. So even though Ukraine wasn't a NATO member, its army was a de facto extension of NATO. Their battalion, 30 of their battalions were considered to be interoperable with NATO, meaning that you could plug out a German battalion from a German division, plug in the Ukrainian battalion, and it would function seamlessly. For the Russians, this was unacceptable. And so one of their objectives is to demilitarize. That means to deconstruct the NATO military infrastructure that exists in Ukraine today. Both these military objectives are designed to achieve two political objectives. One is the liberation of the Donbass, to make sure that Lugansk and Donetsk are under Russian-speaking sovereignty. Two is to achieve the neutrality, permanent neutrality of Ukraine, so that never again Russia can be threatened by Ukraine becoming a NATO state. This is the purpose of the military operation. It's a complex operation. The Ukrainian military is very professional, very well trained, led. They're putting up a heck of a fight. This is not easy. This is difficult, but the Russians are winning. And they're on the verge of, I think, winning a decisive victory that will achieve all of their political objectives in the not too distant future.
Well, you've answered all my questions. And You know, you said something earlier, you know, how you were trained in the military. You hated the Russians. You wanted to kill them. And you said when you went there, it was eye-opening.
Yeah.
So what was the eye-opening? What was your emotion?
Well, look, I consider myself to be a nice guy. And what I mean by that is if you and I meet on the street, unless you do something egregious to me or my family, you know, I'm going to shake your hand. We'll have a conversation. We can sit down and have a beer. We're human beings.
Right.
We share the same desires in life. We want to be happy. We want to, you know, have a roof over our head, food on the table, raise our family, education, entertainment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you and I went to war, it would be difficult for me to kill you because I like you. I view you as a fellow human being. So in order for me to actually go to war against you, I've got to learn to hate you. I've got to learn up front to hate you. I got to learn to view you as less than human. That's just the reality. And so when we dealt with the Russians, I respected them. I knew their culture. I read their literature. I read everything, but I bought into the evil empire notion. I bought into the Soviet Bolsheviks wanting to attack my family. You know, there's the old Cold War sayings, kill a commie for mommy, or, you know, better dead than red. I believed in that 100%. That's why I was rushing to join the armed forces, because I viewed the Soviets as a threat worthy of my life, to give my life up in defense of my country against this threat. I wasn't ignorant of their culture, their language, who they were, but I had put it through a filter that hardened me to view them as the enemy, and therefore to be prepared and be willing to kill them if called upon to do so. Now I'm suddenly sent over there into the city of Vodkinsk, which is literally 750 miles east of Moscow in the foothills of the Ural Mountains, in an area that had been closed to foreigners since the revolution. So we're the first non-German prisoners of war, because some German POWs went there and helped build buildings, but we're the first non-German prisoners of war to come to Vodkinsk. 30 Americans who aren't there just temporary. We're building a permanent inspection facility outside of a Soviet missile factory that's producing missiles that are solely produced to hit the United States. In fact, when the first missiles came out, we would joke when we inspected, we'd name them. I think the first one we named Pittsburgh, the second one we named Des Moines, the third one we named Chicago, and then we were told to stop naming them because it was too close to the truth. I mean, it made people uncomfortable. But, you know, so it's serious business that we're doing that's related to the security of the United States. But this isn't about us coming in and imposing our will. This is a cooperative venture. This is us working with our Soviet counterparts to create an